In this lesson, we'll learn how to create an animated lightning bolt effect in 3ds Max. Alright, so at this point we're just about finished with the setup for this pod racer. Now one thing that we want to come in and add is sort of the electricity bolt, kind of the lightning bolt that would run between these two pods. Now in 3ds Max there is really not a simple one-click solution that we can use to create this type of effect, but we can actually build one from scratch. So technically this won't really involve a whole lot of dynamics. This will be involving a little bit of modeling, a little bit of rigging, a little bit of animation, but overall this will be a really nice way to finish off this pod before we actually get into the lighting and rendering portion. So let's start by taking this pod racer controller, so we can just grab this little pink bracket around our pod. Let's go into the motion tab and once again take our path constraint weight down to 0. Alright, so that way we can actually come in and create the lightning bolt effect without any kind of interference from the movement of this pod, just like what we did with the actual particles. So let's start by going into the top view, and let's just press the Z key on our keyboard to zoom in. And looking down from the top, I'm going to start by creating the actual lightning bolt itself. So in the Create menu, let's go into the Shapes and Splines. So what I'm going to do is just start with a line. So I'll just click once over here, and then once right over here. And then when I'm done, just right-click to end my selection. So essentially just one single line that's connecting these two pods together. So let's now go into the modifiers. Let's go in and grab a segment, which is going to be this portion right in here. And because I only drew 2 points in this line, there really should only be one segment that links those together. So what I want to do now is, whenever it comes time to create this lightning bolt effect, I'm going to need a lot more than just these 2 points in here. So a way of just coming in here and very quickly adding a uniform spacing between these 2 points and starting to add more detail in here is with this segment selected. Let's scroll down and let's look for this divide option. So let's come in here and hit divide, and now you notice that this has divided this one segment into 2. And we can see that by this little purple little vertex that's right in here, and it's just purple because that happens to be the color that I have selected up here. So now if we want, we can continue dividing this. So now that those 2 segments now become 4, those 4 now become 8, and so on and so forth until I get the number of segments in here that I want. So once I have this in place, again, we can now see that we have nice evenly spaced vertices in here. Now let's give this curve some animation. That way we can start to actually recreate the effect of some kind of an energy bolt between these two. So with this line selected, let's go into the modifiers list and let's drop in a noise modifier. So scroll down, look for noise. There we are. And now we can start to introduce a little bit of noise into this. So starting to dial up the strength. What we want to do is consider our different axes here. So at the moment you can see I'm adjusting the strength for my X axis, which is actually the axis that runs from side to side. And I really don't want this to be distorted from side to side. I really want this to be distorted front to back and up and down. So let's go ahead and I'll bring that strength down to 0. And let's instead adjust the Y strength. There we are. And as we start to dial this up, we can start to see a little bit more distortion in here. Now let's come in here and start to add in some fractal noise. There we are. Now you can start to see a much more jagged pattern in here. So once we do that, we may need to actually come back and start to adjust the strength of this Y distortion. Now let's also come in here and turn on the animate noise. So that way as I start to scrub through here, we can actually start to see this distorting. So in my case, quite a bit of distortion that's happening here. So my strength is probably a bit too strong. There we go. That's probably a little bit better. So what we can also start to do is, now that we have this proper amount of distortion, if we want to add a little bit more irregularity in here, we can now just start to increase this roughness. There we are. And now if I were to deselect that, we can actually start to see kind of this nice animated lightning bolt in here. Now, it looks good from this top view, but if we were to come in here and look at this from our perspective view, just press the Z key on my keyboard to zoom in on this, you'll see that this lightning bolt, again, looks good from the top, but if we were to look at this from the front, we probably wouldn't see much distortion at all. Right? And this would probably become a little bit easier to see if I were to select this. And if I want to isolate this, I can just press Alt-Q on my keyboard and enter an isolation mode. So that way I don't have to worry about seeing anything else. And again, now it becomes a little bit easier to see that this curve is only distorting really in one way. So let's grab this. Let's go back to this noise modifier. And now let's start to increase this Z strength, which will allow it to distort up and down. So I'll try to create something that pretty closely matches my Y strength. So in my case, it looks like 9 was working pretty well. So that's really not giving me the effect that I want. Now, instead of just adjusting this either from the top or from the front, it's kind of now adjusting this kind of from a 45-degree angle. So what we can do is, if we want to get this a little bit more distorted in all three axes, one method that I find works really well is to just go into my noise modifier, grab the center, and then start to move this somewhere outside of the center of our curve. So if I were to come in and pull this forward, or just somewhere where it's off center a little bit more, now you can start to see much better distortion in all three axes. As we start to scrub through our animation, you can start to see a really nice beginning stage of some kind of a lightning bolt that can link these two together. So once I have that set, exit out of my isolation mode. Alright, so overall not off to a bad start. So what we'll start to do in our next lesson is continue this process of adding and creating a few different features for this lightning bolt.